So we'll continue with environment today. Yesterday, what did we study? We looked at CBD, Convention on Biodiversity. What else did we look at yesterday? We looked at the Nagoya Protocol. We looked at the Cartagena Protocol. What else did we look at? Refer your notes and tell me. Biodiversity. We started defining biodiversity. That's how we started defining the class. What is biodiversity? Correct. Varied species of life living together is biodiversity. Okay, we will continue with the biodiversity theme today also, and we will look at some examples before that. Okay, we'll look at some definitions before that. Then we will start looking at some conventions like CITES, CMS. Okay, and then we will go to biodiversity hotspots. Okay, we'll go to biodiversity hotspots, and maybe we'll touch upon Ramsar sites also today. Okay, so this is what we'll be covering. We'll just start looking at some definitions today. Okay, very important definitions, and from prelims point of view, it is important you understand every definition, because in the prelims you'll have a question saying, what is carbon sequestration? Is it a process or is it a physical place? What does it have to do with? So small distinctions will be there in the definitions, and this is what we will look at today. Okay, the first definition we'll look at is carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is a process by which atmospheric carbon dioxide is collected, and it is either stored in biomass or in the soil or in water. This is the definition. Okay, important part. Okay, process. Carbon sequestration is a process by which atmospheric carbon dioxide is taken into biomass. That is the first thing that we say. Biomass means what? This is biomass. Biomass means what? Biomass. Wherever, no, biomass means any organism is biomass. Any organism that has life is biomass. For example, in prelims you have been having the question that says, which of the following ecosystems has the highest biomass? This question has come twice in prelims now, correct? Which of the following ecosystems has the highest biomass? Is it a tropical rainforest? Is it a wetland? Which one is this? Right? So how do you start thinking about these things? That is the first question, right? Biomass means, what is the answer for what is biomass? Anything with life is biomass. Okay? Anything with life is biomass. Anything with life is also genetic resource. Correct? Okay. But the context matters. When we are talking about biotechnology, when we are talking about pharma industries, we are going to be talking in terms of genetic resources. When we are talking about environment and geography, we are going to be calling it as biomass. Anything with life can be considered biomass. I am biomass, you are biomass. The dog outside on the street is also biomass. The tree is also biomass. Okay. So plants, trees, anything that you see is biomass. Clear, no? Biomass is not just plant material or not just tree material. I think this much must be very clear to everybody, because students get confused thinking it is just plants or trees. Not just plants or trees. Okay. So atmospheric carbon dioxide is taken up by trees or plants or biomass and soil or the ocean, and stored as carbon in biomass soils or the ocean. See, here the word is coming. Stored as biomass. Okay, it is stored as biomass. Atmospheric carbon dioxide can be taken up by trees and plants. How? They use it up for photosynthesis. They use it up for photosynthesis. Correct? Okay. So this is carbon sequestration. Sequestration is pulling the carbon from the atmosphere and depositing it into biomass, or depositing it to the soil, depositing it in the oceans or water. Okay? Clear? Any doubt about this definition? Okay. In a moment you will get a doubt now. Okay. Okay. What is the example of carbon sequestration? how can we achieve carbon sequestration? Correct. Why should we remove excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? What is the purpose? Reduce global warming. Okay, carbon dioxide is one of the major causes of global warming. If the content of carbon dioxide is higher, what happens? Warming happens. The planet begins to warm. If the atmospheric content of carbon dioxide is lower, it begins to cool down a little. What percentage of our air is carbon dioxide? 0.03%. Okay, just 0.03%. So if you keep pumping carbon dioxide into air, this percentage can vary a little. Okay, so we don't want that. Now, this is why carbon sequestration is important, where we are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and depositing it into biomass, soil and oceans. Okay. Examples of how to make carbon sequestration happen. What is the best way that you can think of? Forestation. Plant trees, plant forest. Best way to pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and deposit it into the ground. Simplest way. Okay. I mean, there are additional benefits of planting trees and forests. That's a different story. Okay. But for carbon sequestration, planting trees is one of the best way to do it. When we talk, I'll be talking about carbon credit also. I'll explain in detail. Okay. Now, carbon sink. This is the term. What is a carbon sink? Just when I talk about these terms, no, start thinking about each word. Carbon sink. What is a sink? A sink is like a bowl. Correct? No. You have a sink at home. It's a bowl. It's a big bowl. What is a sink? A sink is a big bowl. Correct? No. A basin. Wash basin, wash sink. So a sink is a big bowl. Carbon sink means it's a big bowl into which carbon is going. Clear? No? Very simple terms. Carbon sink means the big bowl where carbon is going. Right. So a natural or artificial reservoir that absorbs and stores more carbon and carbon compounds than it releases, thus lowering the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay. So what is a carbon sink? It is a natural or artificial reservoir. Reservoir means what? A big storage space, right? Like a sink. Understood? No? This can also mean carbon sink can also be said as carbon reservoir. Correct? No? It's a reservoir for carbon. Carbon sink is reservoir for carbon. Something that holds carbon. That is what we are saying. Okay. So it can be either natural or artificial. That is okay. Now, one important part of the definition is that a carbon sink must absorb more carbon dioxide than it releases. Okay. Can you think of an example of a carbon sink? Oceans. Correct. Forest. Forest is also a carbon sink. So we said example of forest for a carbon sink, and we said example of carbon to achieve carbon sequestration. So what is the difference between the two? What is the difference between carbon sequestration and carbon sink? Both are reducing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Correct? No. What is the difference? No. No. It can be natural or artificial reservoir in this case. Even in that, carbon sequestration, you are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and putting it into the ground. Here also the same thing is happening. Here also you can do forestation. You literally said that an example of carbon sink is forest. Correct? So what is the difference between the two? That's why you have to look at words very carefully in any definition. Okay. So read this definition and I'll go back to the other definition. See if you can figure out. If you can't figure out, I'll tell you. Okay. Okay. Now this is the example. Okay. Carbon sequestration is the process.
Here it's stored as carbon. In C that it's destroyed the entire carbon.
No, it's not like that. No. So, okay, I'll go to it now. See, the important term that you have to look at here is process. Okay, what is this? This is a process. So, in the case of this one, what did we say? In the case of the other one, what did we say? This is a process. Carbon sequestration is the process by which the carbon dioxide is getting removed. The place to which it is putting is called carbon sink. You understood the difference? Yes or no? Still confused? You're still confused. Tell me, what is your doubt? See, this is the process. This is the process by which carbon dioxide is getting removed. Sink is the place. Sink is a physical place into which it is going. This is not a physical place. This is a process. Understood? No. Carbon sequestration is a process by which carbon dioxide is being removed. Carbon sink is a physical place, right? Is a physical place which is absorbing the carbon. Now, one more important part of this that I want to highlight is stores more carbon, and carbon stores more carbon than it releases. Okay, so these are physical places that may also release carbon dioxide. Okay, it may also release carbon dioxide, but it will end up storing more carbon dioxide. A simple example of this is wetlands. You know what are wetlands, no? So wetlands are a very simple definition of a carbon sink. Even forests are carbon sinks, no doubt. Okay, oceans are also carbon sinks. Now, example of carbon sink, I have said the Amazon rainforest, because we call it the lungs of the earth. But you can also talk about our Western Ghats. You can also talk about the entire forest ecosystem of the Himalayas till Thailand. Okay, you can talk about those also. Those are also very effective carbon sinks. Okay, now one more term called carbon credit. When you are trying to look at definitions, we will look at it in two parts. Carbon is okay. What is credit? Okay, have you studied economy? You have studied economy. Okay, what is credit? What is credit? Debit. You have seen your bank accounts. Credit means, okay, correct. But if you have a note of credit, what does that mean? Okay, is your currency credit or debit? Huh? Both. Okay, if you are a holder of currency, do you have a credit note or a debit note? Huh? Credit note. You have a credit note if you are holding currency. Correct. If you give a credit note to somebody, then what happens? You can get some service in return. Right? Wrong. A credit note says that the person who you are giving it to owes you a service. Right? Wrong. Right. Okay. So that's what a credit note means. So when you say carbon credit, you think of currency notes. Okay. So the carbon credit is a permit or certificate that allows the holder to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay. One credit permits the emission of a mass equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. Understood, no? I'll just repeat this. So, important part of the definition is, it is a permit or certificate that allows the holder of the carbon credit to release 1 ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In some countries, carbon emissions are quite strict. Okay, they are beginning to do it, especially in Canada. Okay, in Canada, if you want to emit, let's say 1 ton or 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide, you have to pay, I think the starting is 70 Canadian dollars now. $70 you have to pay if you want to emit 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In India, we still don't have that because they are a developing country. They are a developed country, different stories. Their per capita consumption of energy is literally 5 to 10x of what is ours. So it's a different story. But for the sake of understanding carbon credit, I am telling you. Okay. So carbon credit is a permit or certificate that allows the holder to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Clear? When we talk about Kyoto Protocol and we are talking about climate change, we will be discussing about carbon credits in detail. But you just have to know, if you have a note of carbon credit, you can emit carbon dioxide. This is just carbon currency. Think of carbon credit as carbon currency. Got it, no? Okay. So how does a carbon credit work? We will look at it with an example. Okay. Now let's say an industry wants to emit 100 tons of carbon dioxide. Okay. Beyond its approved limit. Then what will the industry do? The industry does not want to stop production. Then what can it do? It can buy carbon credits to emit that carbon dioxide. This much is clear to you now? Okay, no doubt. So if a company wants or an industry wants to emit 100 metric tons more than what it is allowed to, it can buy carbon credits and it can emit. Number one. So who is selling these carbon credits? That is the first question. And how do you get the carbon credits? So let's say you have a renewable energy farm. If you have a renewable energy farm, you can create energy in it and supply to the grid. Then you will get carbon credits from the government. Okay, now you will get carbon credits from the government. I am talking about Canada now. Let's just have Canada. Let's not include India in this discussion. We're just talking about Canada. So the Canadian government will give you carbon credits if you are running a renewable energy farm, like let's say solar farm or wind energy farm. Now this entity, that is the solar energy farm or wind energy farm, can sell these carbon credits to the industry that wants to emit it at a higher rate. So both of them are gaining from this, correct? How are they both gaining? The industry is also gaining, the wind energy farm is also gaining, government is also gaining. How are they gaining? The industry is being allowed to continue to run. Even though it's not supposed to emit more pollution, it is being allowed to emit more pollution. So that is good for the industry. For the wind energy farm, it is getting more money. One from production of electricity, the other one from carbon credit. It is getting from both sources. The government is getting carbon tax by selling carbon credits. So they are also there to gain. Understood? This is how this ecosystem works. Any doubts about carbon credits? When we talk about Kyoto Protocol and UNFCCC, you will see carbon credits can also be dealt at a country level. Here we are just talking at a local level within the country. But one country itself can sell carbon credits to another country. How is that? Now let's say a developed country wants to emit more carbon dioxide. It does not want to slow down consumption, but it has a lot more money, right? Now let's say countries like Norway, per capita income is itself, I think, over $60,000-$70,000 today. I mean, even more, I think. I don't know the exact figure, but it is like at least 12 to 13, 14x of what is India's per capita GDP. So they have lots of money. They don't want to slow down consumption, but they are ready to pay some kind of a tax for it. So what they will do is they will buy carbon credits from developing nations and they will pay them some money. Okay, now this is how it works on an international level. We will explain that also now. Okay. So it's called carbon offsetting. There are two terms here. Okay, the first one is carbon offsetting. I'll be talking about another term. Carbon offsetting is a way for individuals or companies to invest in environmental projects around the world in order to balance their own ecological footprint. I explained this, correct? Now, how an industry can invest or buy carbon credits from another company to offset its carbon footprint. Correct? Wrong? Any doubt? You're not getting this. Either only this, the other one you understood? Okay, carbon. Let's go slowly then. We'll just explain what is offsetting. Okay, what does offset mean? Offset, what does offset mean? Offset printing kelidira? Have you heard offset printing? Okay, offset means it is shifting. Offset literally means shifting. So carbon offsetting you can say is shifting of carbon responsibility. So they are shifting the responsibility, and here individuals or companies can invest in environmental projects around the world. What are examples of environmental projects? Environmental projects. When I say environment, what comes to your head? Forest. Forest comes to your head. Forest is an environmental project. Yes or no? So these companies can invest in forestation projects. Okay? When they invest in forestation projects around the world, they earn, and then they can then they can emit. See, here we are not talking about carbon credit. Here we are talking about a process. Carbon credit is a physical note like currency. Here we are talking about process. Carbon offsetting is also one kind of a process or dealing. It's a deal. Carbon offsetting is a deal where the company is going and telling, I will do some forestation to offset my, I will just give money to some NGO as a company and tell them go do this forestation, and then I'll go tell the local authority saying, oh see, I have done this forestation, so this is taking so much carbon, so let me emit this much amount. They are trying to say.
The same company going to purchase carbon credit.
They may, see, not necessary. It is not necessary. They can either purchase carbon credit, but if they don't want, if that mechanism is not there in that country, let's say the mechanism of carbon credit is not there in all countries, but if they don't have the mechanism of carbon credit, but they still want to balance their carbon footprint, what will they do? You can't sit waiting for carbon credits, no. So in such a case, it is just a barter deal kind of thing. Understood? No. So carbon offsetting is a process or a deal, that's all, where they are saying, okay, I will emit lots of pollution, but I will also do some kind of a carbon sink that can absorb it. Okay, that is what you mean by environmental projects. So this can be at, see, carbon offsetting can be at a local level, it can be at a national level, it can be at an international level. I just gave you an example of Norway, no? So instead of buying carbon credits, they can say we are going to do some kind of an afforestation project in some developing country where some hotspot is threatened. Acceptable, acceptable or no? Or will you insist on carbon credits only? No. You can say, okay, come help me conserve this beautiful area, and instead of that in Norway you go emit 1000 extra tons of carbon dioxide. Correct? No, because this is going to act as a sink that is going to pull it. Right? Wrong? Okay. So this is clear? Okay. Now carbon tax. Once again we can go back to Canada as an example. Okay, because Canada is one of the foremost when it comes to carbon tax and all these carbon things. And their citizens are not very happy about it. Okay. For example, in India tomorrow they ask you to pay a carbon tax, will you be happy? We don't want to pay GST only. So carbon tax is a different story. Okay. So what is a carbon tax? A carbon tax is a tax on the usage of equipment that produces a lot of carbon dioxide. Those equipment can be what? Vehicles, cars, bikes, so on and so forth. What else can it be? Very unclean ways of producing energy. What is the most unclean way of producing energy that we use today? Coal. We use coal, fossil fuels basically. Coal is nothing but fossil fuel. It can also be diesel, right? We have diesel power plants, we have coal based power plants. Petrol, I don't think we have. We have petrol power plants, huh? No, okay. So we have petrol vehicles, okay. But we have gas based power plants, okay. We have gas based power plants. That's also a fossil fuel. So fossil fuels are considered to be a little unclean way of producing energy. What is the cleanest way of producing energy? Not solar. Renewable energy, correct. But do you know what is the cleanest, considered to be the cleanest? It is clean. Solar energy is the form of green energy, no doubt, no doubt. But it is not the cleanest. No, not wind, not wind, not geothermal also. And geothermal you cannot generate enough. There is only one thing that is the cleanest for the atmosphere, and that is nuclear. Nuclear energy is the cleanest source of energy on earth. Can you explain why? Because everything else needs so many equipment. This one also needs equipment, but the amount of energy that it can produce for that equipment is so high that it becomes the cleanest form of energy, and also most reliable if you have the fuel. If you have access to fuel, nuclear is also the most reliable form of energy if you have access to fuel. Now let's say you have uranium deposits in your country and you can harvest that uranium. Nuclear is the most reliable form of energy of everything else. Okay. So we finished discussing carbon tax. Any doubt in this? Okay. Why should we have a carbon tax? Correct. Now let's say people start emitting carbon dioxide as they want. Then what happens? The process of warming the atmosphere is going up. Correct? No. To make sure that people don't overdo it, they're saying you start paying money if you want to emit more. That's all. That's the whole point of carbon tax. And the governments love taxes. Governments love taxes. So like I said, Canada has a minimum carbon tax of 60 Canadian dollars, not 70. 60 Canadian dollars per metric ton of carbon dioxide that you emit. Okay, a very important term. This is geoengineering. Okay. Again, when you say geo, again you have to think of Earth only. Correct? No. The Earth is also called a word called geoid. Have you heard by studying? Correct. The shape of the Earth is a geoid. So here we are calling geoengineering. That means Earth engineering. Can we call it Earth engineering? We can call it Earth engineering. Okay. Okay. So here you can say geoengineering is the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the earth so that we start working on climate change, or we start controlling climate change, we start engineering climate change. Understood? Deliberate large-scale manipulation. That means we are doing something to start controlling climate change. That is only geoengineering, but it has to be done on a large scale. Why large scale? Why large scale? See, when you're talking about geoengineering, that by definition is large scale. Correct? No. And if you really want to make a difference to the temperature of the earth, then it has to be large scale. Can you just do it over Karnataka and say, I'm going to change, I'm going to have climate change? You can't do it. Karnataka is itself a very, very vast area. It's as big as some of the European countries. Correct? No. Karnataka is as big as some of the European countries. Can you just do it over one state and say we are going to do climate change? Or can just one country do it and say, oh, we are doing climate change? You can't do it. It has to be done at a global level. Okay? That's only why it's called geoengineering. Okay? So these are some of the terms that I wanted to introduce you to, because in the next class I think we'll be doing climate change. So all of these terms will come up. Okay. Now we'll go back to conventions. Okay, and we'll finish this very quickly. So we're talking now about sites. Yesterday we finished with, we are back to conservation now. Okay, I just wanted to introduce you to climate terms so that tomorrow we can continue with climate stuff. We are coming back to conservation and biodiversity now. For the rest of the class, I'll be talking only about conservation and biodiversity. So switch your minds to conservation and biodiversity. What is the full form of CITES? Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Flora, fauna, you know by now, correct? No, flora means plant-based, fauna means animal-based. So, this is a convention that says do not trade in endangered species of animals and plants. We know the animal is endangered, correct? No, that means we have to take care of those species. Why we have to take care of those species? To maintain ecological balance, correct? No, we have no doubt till here. Then the question that we have to answer is, how do we do it? How do we make sure that international trade in endangered species is not happening? Correct? For that, this is a framework. This is a convention. This is a international treaty. When we say treaty, it means it's a legal framework. Clear? No? We have discussed about conventions, international treaties, legal frameworks over the last 2 classes. Any doubt? Convention means it's a gathering. So, like a conference is generally, when we spoke about conference of parties, you remember the term, yesterday we were talking about conference of parties. Convention is the international treaty. Conference happens every 2 years. I'm talking about CBD now, Convention on Biodiversity. The banner is Convention on Biodiversity, that is the treaty. Every 2 years there is a meeting. That's called a conference. Conference is what? It's a meeting. Convention means that's the banner, international treaty. Clear? No? No doubt? Very simple thing. Very not much. Don't get confused. Whenever we say convention, it means it's a legal framework, a treaty. Conference is a discussion. Okay. So whenever there are conferences, there are some list of achievements of those conferences. They'll put it out. COP21. These are the achievements of this conference. Understood? No, that's more like a MOM. MOM and the minutes of meeting. Like if you do it in corporate, we have an MOM. They have a listing of their own achievements for those conferences. Conference is just a meeting. Meeting of whom? Meeting of the parties who are signatory to the convention. Clear? No? Actually, very simple thing. Don't worry. Okay. CITES means Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So again, once again, see, it's an international agreement to ensure that trade in wild animals and plants doesn't threaten their existence. Very important to see the wordings whenever we are talking about definitions. What does it say? It is saying doesn't threaten, where is it? Okay, doesn't threaten their survival. It is not saying there is a ban. Is the treaty saying there is a ban? No, it is saying that the international trade should not threaten the survival of these species. So in the very definition only you can get to know. That's why whenever you are reading about conventions, legal treaties, or even if you are reading polity, you should read every word and you should understand it. The definition is so important. In the definition, you will have the hidden meaning of what it means. Got it, no? Okay. So, CITES, it regulates trade. Regulates trade. It does not ban trade because it does not have the power to enforce it. Okay, and you have to say it is carefully controlled trade. The regulation is carefully controlled so that the species does not go extinct. What is the purpose of CITES? Protect endangered species. Okay. Okay. So now CITES has 3 appendix. When we speak about appendix in plural, it is called appendices. Okay, that's the word, appendices. So CITES has 3 appendices. In your book, have you seen appendix? What is an appendix? Appendix. Index is content. What is appendix? Appendix is not details of the term, that is glossary. Appendix is at the very end of the book, where they are going to put some things that can be available for easy reference. List. Appendix is a list. Okay, no? It can be tables also. Now, there are 3 appendices. In the first appendix, what do we have? We have, this is important, just focus on for 2 minutes, because if you understand this CITES, then you will understand CMS also, the next one that we are talking about, because both have the same structure. Okay, so appendix 1 has species that are most endangered. Appendix 1 has species that are most endangered. What is an example? Black rhino. Black rhino is one of the most endangered species, and CITES has it in appendix 1. Okay, so these are almost at the risk of extinction. They are almost at the risk of extinction. If trade continues, they will go extinct. These are those kind of flora and fauna, not just fauna, not just animals, both plants and animals. Clear? Huh? Okay, so for this, commercial trade is prohibited. In fact, in the appendix of CITES, the wordings they use is almost always prohibited. They don't say prohibited like how we have written it here. It says almost always prohibited, because they are not able to enforce it. Understood, no? So, CITES appendix 1 has the most endangered animals in it. Now, let's look at appendix 2. Appendix 2, these are species that aren't necessarily endangered right now, but if they continue trading in it, it will become endangered. So we don't want to go to that stage. Before that only they start putting it in the appendix, and they'll say if you continue trading in it, then this will become endangered. Okay, right. So example is African elephants and ivory. Ivory trade was big. I mean, you would have seen Kenya and everything. All these National Geographic videos you would have seen. Okay. So appendix 2 is not necessarily endangered, but must be closely monitored. And example is African elephants. We have almost 400,000 African elephants today. Correct, no? That's not a very small number. But we had this discussion, no? Compared to what was there in 1500, it is a minuscule population. Huh? And if it continues like this, that will also become endangered. Okay, CITES appendix 3. This has all the species that is protected at least in one country. For example, in India you may have one species that is there in abundance, but that species may not be there in abundance in some other country. So some other country may place it in their endangered list or in their protected list. So even those species are protected under CITES, but they are placed in appendix 3. Clear? Huh? There are 3 appendices. The first one has endangered animals, where trade is almost always prohibited. That is the wording that is used by CITES itself. Almost always prohibited. What is appendix 2? Not necessarily endangered, but continual trade in it will result in it becoming endangered. Example is African elephant, okay, and the trade in ivory. The third list or the third appendix is these are species that are protected in at least one of the countries that are part of CITES. Understood, no? This is about CITES. That's all. Very simple. So again, now we are going to look at Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Okay. So we are not talking about flora here at all. Correct? No. When we are talking about CMS, we are not talking about flora. Can flora migrate? Plants cannot walk, plants cannot fly, plants cannot run. So, no flora. These questions will come in prelims. Which of the following conventions deals with both flora and fauna? They will give sites, CMS, CBD. What will you do? Huh? Sites. What about CBD? CBD you don't want. Sites and CBD both, flora and fauna. But CMS is understood, no? So these are the kind of questions that will come. Very simple, but you should be able to think. Huh? Okay. So convention on migratory species of wild animals. You have to look at the word here again. It is not just birds, not just migratory species of birds. It says wildlife. It also includes whales. Whales also migrate from one part of the ocean to another part of the ocean, like halfway around the world they go. Sharks, they also go from one place in earth to another place, like really far they travel just to reproduce. Okay. Turtles are amphibians, correct? No, turtles are neither on land or on sea. Sea, they are in both, correct? They are amphibians. They also migrate a lot. Have you heard of olive ridley turtles? What are olive ridley turtles? Where have you heard them? With respect to what place? Odisha, correct. Yeah. So you have olive ridley turtles. Why do they come there? To breed, to reproduce, correct. Okay. So I think that is clear now. Convention on conservation of migratory species of wild animals. So flora is not included, wild animals is included. That means birds are included, amphibians are included, and even marine organisms are included. Understood? Okay. Now this is also called as the Bonn Convention. Why? Because Bonn is a place in Germany. Understood? No? Okay. That's where it was signed. Similar to how we call it Ramsar sites. Why do we call it Ramsar sites? Because Ramsar is a place in Iran. That is where it was signed. That's why it is Ramsar sites. That's all. Nothing else. So even conventions are named like that only. Paris Agreement, Doha Declaration, so on and so forth. Okay. Okay. Now, why is it needed? That is the question we have to answer now. Why is it needed? It's a very simple logic, correct? Now these species are migrating from one place to another place, correct? They are migrating from one country to another country, one continent to other continent, correct? Have you heard of Siberian cranes? Siberian cranes come to India from Siberia. Where is Siberia? Siberia is in Eurasia. Russia is Asia only, but it's really far. It's almost near the Arctic Circle only. From there the cranes come to India. Where did it come? Very good. Which park? Kuala Dev National Park, Kuala Dev Ghana National Park in Rajasthan. Siberian crane comes there. That's why it's a very famous wetland site. It's a Ramsar site. Got it, no? Okay. That also I'll talk about. Don't worry. I'll talk about it. Okay, so we were talking about why the CMS is needed. So this is coming, let's say, from Russia to India now, correct? It is coming from Russia to India. Now both countries have to protect it. Yes or no? Can one, if they are only protected in India, and if somebody is hunting Siberian cranes in Russia, what will happen? The population will dwindle. So both the countries have to be on board. Like this, there are so many species that are migrating. Can we keep talking for every species, saying that, oh, we'll have this agreement for this species, that agreement for this species with this country, and with another country just for this species we'll have an agreement? It becomes very difficult. Correct? No, it becomes very difficult. So you need some centralized place where all the nations can come together that have a lot of inflow of migratory wild animals and say, oh, let's all together protect it. Right? That place and that convention is this CMS. Okay, again it's a framework that is being made available to all of these countries which see migration of wild animals so that they can protect it. That is all this is. Clear? Convention on conservation on migratory species of wild animals. So, I mean, I can give you the notes also, you can see it. How does it work? Now again, I was telling you, pay attention when I was teaching you about sites and its appendix, correct? I told you, no, that the structure is similar to sites. So in the case of CMS or the species, you have two appendix, appendix 1 and appendix 2. Appendix 1 includes species that are endangered. In what? In both, in sites also, in CMS also. That's why I said pay attention. In both, appendix 1 is species that are endangered. So we have to conserve their habitats and reduce their obstacles to migration. That is what we say. What are the examples? We just spoke about Siberian crane. We just spoke about it. So Siberian crane is an example of an endangered species that is also under CMS. Clear, no? Next, what is appendix 2? Appendix 2 includes species that need international cooperation for conservation. Again, like the previous time, appendix 2 has those species that may not be endangered now, but if they are not protected, they may become endangered. Clear, no? Any doubt? Okay, this is appendix 2. So we have only two appendices. In CMS we have only two appendices, not three. Okay. Example, you can see there are many sharks which travel vast distances across the ocean. Okay, all of these sharks need some kind of protection so that they are not hunted. Right. I don't know if you know how international fishing works, but fishing, the bombing is a very small part, but they have huge trawlers. I mean, trawlers that are as big as like 300 foot, 350 foot trawlers. They go and they pick up everything in the ocean. They pick up everything. It does not matter whether it's a small fish or a shark or a whale. They go pick everything, they bring it in and they dump it on the shore. That's how international fishing works. So when these trawlers start picking up these kind of sharks that are migrating and that are on the verge of endangerment or that are already endangered, that is not good. So somebody needs to tell them you will be held accountable. Correct? No. If you don't tell them that there is going to be some accountability, they will not care. Correct? That's why we have these agreements. That's all. Rest is, I mean, you can also see there are some other agreements under this. This you can just read. There are some agreements under the CMS, that is conservation of African Eurasian migratory water birds and so on and so forth. This is under CMS, that's all. For example, if some people think that they need more focus on certain regions, they can have their own agreements also. This is one example, because CMS is just a forum. It's an international treaty where these nations can come together. If they want to work even more closely, they can have their own treaties also. Nothing is stopping them. Understood? No. If you have to think in international terms, let's say you have UN. UN is a forum where all international countries come and there are lots of things that are discussed. Does that mean two individual countries cannot get into a pact? We get into individual pacts also, like bilateral pacts also we get into other countries. Similarly, under this also they can get into bilateral pacts. No, nothing is stopping them from doing it. Now we are coming to hotspots, biodiversity hotspots. You have already heard this term. Okay, no. Biodiversity hotspots. Can you tell me the meaning just by reading the word? Huh? Yeah, lot of flora and fauna is there. That's why it's a hotspot. Hotspot means something that is there in great numbers or something that is very happening. Correct? No? If you say in Bangalore, what is the hotspot for shopping? What will you say? Chickpete. Okay, budget shopping is Chickpete. If you want expensive shopping, you will say Indira Nagar. Right? So things like this. If you say what is the hub or hotspot for UPSC coaching, you will say Chandra Layout. Correct? No? So like that. These are hotspots. Similarly, if you say what is the hotspot for biodiversity, what will you say? In India, what are the examples? Himalayas are in Western Ghats is an example. Northeast comes under Himalaya, but there is another term for it called Indo-Burma. It's called Indo-Burma. We'll talk about that also. Indo-Burma. Any other spaces in Andaman is not, but Nicobar is. Okay, Nicobar is a space called Sundaland. Okay, I'll talk about Sundaland also. Very good, very good. So these are the 4 major biodiverse hotspots in India. But there are such hotspots across the world. Okay, one of the biggest examples of such hotspots in the world is it's an Amazon forest. Absolutely, Amazon forest is very biodiverse. But what makes it a hotspot? Is biodiversity sufficient? No. So we call it a hotspot when the concentration of endemic species is very high. What is endemic species? In that particular place, that species is found abundantly or in a decent population. In other places also it may be found, but not to this extent, because it could be found beyond the geographical area also, but it is not very well distributed. That is what endemic species means. Endemic species means it is constrained and it is found in one particular area. So a hotspot is a region where the concentration of endemic species is higher. So when we talk about Western Ghats, right, even today researchers are finding new species of frogs. Can you imagine? I mean, people are finding bacteria, that's a different story. Here they are finding new species of frogs in our forests even today. So much of Western Ghats is still unexplored in that way. Also, if you look at Amazon, they are finding new species of insects almost every year. Why? Because so much of Amazon is still unexplored. So it becomes a hot spot. But when we talk about endemic species, we have to go back to Charles Darwin. Okay, we have to go back to Charles Darwin. Darwin gave one theory. What is that theory? Survival of the fittest theory. But Darwin also did many other experiments, and he had to look at 2 places to start talking about evolution, right? The survival of the fittest theory is based on what? It is based on evolution. But Darwin also did a lot of work on biodiversity. Okay, Darwin also did a lot of work on biodiversity. Have you heard of the island of Madagascar? Where is Madagascar? Okay, now let's start opening up the map today. We have preloaded. So this is the African continent. Got it? No? This is the African continent. This is Madagascar. Madagascar has split away from Africa. How can you say it has split away from Africa? From shape. Now, if I take this piece and I cut it and I paste it here, it's like a puzzle piece. Okay, there are so many puzzle pieces in the world. You can keep doing puzzles if you have the world map. Okay, so this is split from. Darwin studied how biodiversity differed in the island of Madagascar and in the African continent. And one of the things that many researchers, not just Darwin, many researchers found is that Madagascar had almost 90% endemic species. 90% endemic species. That means that the flora and fauna that you were finding in Madagascar, you were finding nowhere else in the world. 90% of it. Okay. Lemurs. Madagascar lemurs are very famous. Lemurs are like monkeys. I don't know if you have seen lemurs. Okay. We'll just try to. Yeah. Now. Okay. So lemurs are like monkeys. Okay. So Madagascar is very famous for that. Okay. we understood where is Madagascar. Now we'll go back to. Okay. So this is what I was talking. Now, is it enough if the species are just endemic for a place to be a hotspot? No, it should be biodiverse. And there is one more thing that is necessary. There should be a feeling at least that the place should be threatened. Okay, it has to be biologically rich and deeply threatened. If it is not threatened, nobody cares. Okay, a child that cries is given attention. So whenever we say we are deeply troubled, people talk to us, or they may not talk to us. People are not important. But at least when it comes to forests and biodiverse spots, people will look at it. So it should be deeply threatened. Okay. So these are like emergency zones for nature, where you have to immediately take care of them. That's a hotspot. So hotspot has three major necessities. What are the three major necessities? One, it has to be biodiverse. Second, it has to be threatened. Third, there should be a decent concentration of endemic species. Okay? Okay. Why we have to preserve these hotspots? What is the economic element to it? Like I said, no. Like I told you in both the classes that there has to be some kind of an economic element to all of these things. If there is no economic element, politicians won't look at it. That's true all over the world, not just in India. The economic element is that they may find some flora, some flower, some herb in these hotspots, which is going to help build a $1 billion business. Correct? That is the whole idea. And you also have to save the ecosystem. If you don't save the ecosystem, there could be a collapse. If there is a collapse, that will affect everything. How? We will just talk here. Okay. Now, just looking at examples of biodiversity hotspots, we have already spoken about this. The first one is Himalayas. Correct. Himalayas, when we talk about Himalayas, we are talking from where? From Pakistan occupied Kashmir, where the Himalayas is meeting Karakoram, to, hey, not Andaman Nicobar. Andaman Nicobar is an island. Till the beginning of Arakan Yoma. Andaman, not, okay. Anyways, from the beginning of Karakoram to Arakan Yoma in Myanmar. Myanmar is old Burma. Understood, no? Till there, it is Himalayas. Lots of different kinds of forests, correct? What are the different kinds of forests that you find in Himalayas? From tropical to alpine forests, you find everything, including deciduous forests, which is crazy, because deciduous forest, where do you find? You find it in tropical zones, correct? No, like in Karnataka, you have deciduous forests. Now, so again, why Himalayas? Again, even the flora is so wide, because you just said from tropical forest to alpine forest, we have everything. Coniferous forest, yes. Deciduous forest, yes. Moist temperate forest, yes. Tropical forest, yes. Evergreen forest, yes. Alpine forests, yes. We have pines, conifers, everything. So it's one of the most diverse systems. We also have grasslands. What are all these meadows that you have? Huge meadows. If you go to Himachal Pradesh, huge meadows. Correct? No, valleys. Valleys upon valleys, huge grasslands. All your Bollywood film singing and rolling on the grass, where is it happening? It's all happening there only. I mean, budget films. Bigger budget films go to Switzerland, that's all. So, Himalayas, very wide flora. Now we'll come to fauna. Fauna. Amazing fauna in Himalayas. If you go to the north, you have snow leopards and ibex. Snow leopards are amazing creatures. No, you don't find it anywhere. You find it in India, you find it in China. Maybe a little in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is India only. Okay. China has lots of snow leopards. In India, we don't have so many, but China has lots of snow leopards. Ibex, I don't know if you have seen ibex. They are prey of snow leopards. Prey of snow leopards, ibex. Beautiful goats, huge horns. You can just Google and see ibex, beautiful places. Now I begin to come down the Himalayas and I come to the northeast. What do you find there? Red panda. You find red panda. One horn rhino, right? If you come to Assam, you have one horn rhino. You have red pandas. As you keep going, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, you have red panda. Very beautiful creatures. So, pygmy hog. Pygmy hog is also endemic. Straight from red panda to snow leopard. Everything is covered in the Himalayas. So, it's a very beautiful and diverse place. So, it's a hot spot. Agreed? It's a hot spot. Why it's a hot spot? I am telling you. Next, Madagascar we have already discussed. 90% is endemic species. No question only that it must be protected. Western Ghats, so many endemic species, beetles, frogs, whatever you see, has to be protected, and it's a very, very diverse ecosystem. Look at some of the global examples. You can look at California Floristic Province and Cape Floristic Province. Where is Cape? Cape is in South Africa. Okay, Cape is in South Africa. So they have something called the California Floristic Province and Cape Floristic Province. They have a lot of fauna there. Okay, very diverse fauna. California Floristic Province is between California and Mexico. It encompasses both. This Cape Floristic Province is in South Africa. Beautiful flora distribution with endemic species. Just examples. Okay. So biodiversity hotspots in India we have already spoken, saying that it is in Himalaya up to Myanmar. That is the beginning of Arakan-Yoma. Correct. Indo-Burma. I said we will use a term called Indo-Burma. What is Indo-Burma? That's all. You are going to leave all the other places. You don't want them. In between places are there. Why worry about those? We don't want in between places. Okay. Now, we just mark it in the map. Okay. See, almost Arunachal Pradesh, if you take, no? Oh, including Vietnam. This is Indo-Burma. What countries are we adding here? India, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. Correct? All of these put together are Indo-Burma. This Indo-Burma region is very diverse. Exactly how we have a very diverse region here, this is also a very diverse forest. Okay? So, lot of endemic species, that is why it is protected. Even if you see, you will see so many tigers in Cambodia and Thailand, correct? It's a very famous tourist spot. Where are people going and taking photos with these tigers, hugging them? Where is it? Thailand and Cambodia. Both places have it. These monks, I mean, they are not really monasteries, but they are zoos only, where the tigers are sedated and they go hug the tiger, take photo and come back. If the tiger is not sedated, then they have to put their photo in their house. Okay? That's the difference. Now, it also spoke, I said Sundaland, correct? And she said Nicobar, I said it's part of Sundaland. What encompasses Sundaland? We have countries like Malaysia. Where did I stop? When I drew the map, where did I stop? I stopped near Malaysia, correct? From bottom of Malaysia, you have Indonesia, Brunei, and then you have Philippines, Singapore. All of these put together as Sundaland. It's called Sundaland. Don't get confused. I'll just draw it once more. Yeah, just move the map a little bit. And you know how many islands are there in Indonesia? Just guess. Nowhere near. Next. No. Nowhere near, I am telling. Guess. You know how many islands are there in Indonesia? Just guess. No, nothing, nowhere near. No. There are over 5,000 islands in Indonesia. And most people will not guess it, no? You know how many islands are there in Philippines? Again, thousands of islands. Correct. You should know all these things. They keep fighting, no. Philippines fights with, China keeps fighting with Philippines. Let's put it that way, because they fight with everybody. China fights with Philippines, China fights with Vietnam, China fights with India, China is fighting with Japan, China is fighting with Russia. Just for islands, they are fighting with all of them. With India, they are not yet fighting with islands, but maybe if they come to Indian Ocean, they will fight. Okay, so let's come back to environment now. So this is your, this is Indo-Burma. Now we'll use an other color for Sundaland. So we go Malaysia, this is Sundaland, this is Indo-Burma. Clear? This whole area has a huge Indian influence. Why? You can thank two people. Who? Chalukyas and Cholas. Okay? This whole region has an Indian influence. This is also, this country is called what? Indonesia. Where is that name coming from? India only. That's the root word. Understood, no? Indonesia. The Cholas captured everything here. Everything that had the sea, including Indonesia, they have captured. That's why you see an Indian influence, such a strong Indian influence in Indonesia. Indonesia currency has which god? The Indian god. Which Indian god? Ganapati. Correct. They have Ganapati in their currency. In India, we don't have. That's a different. We have one Mahatma on our currency, right? Okay. You also have huge statues of Garuda in Indonesia. All these influences came because of whom? The Cholas. The Cholas came there. Before Cholas, the Chalukyas had considerable influence in this area. You will know about Angkor Wat temples. Have you heard of Angkor Wat temples? Yes, Angkor Wat temple is the largest temple complex in the world. And it is not in India. Which country is it in? It's not in Indonesia. Angkor Wat where? Okay, Google. This I will not tell. You Google where is Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is the largest temple complex in the world. But it's not in India. It's in Cambodia. Okay. So this is the history of why there is Indian influence. There is not just cultural influence, there is an influence of biodiversity also. Correct? So these are the things that you should know. In the interview tomorrow in civil services, if they ask you, how are we related? It's not just cultural influence. There is historical influence, cultural influence, symbolism. Symbolism how? Ganapati is there in Indonesian currency. Garuda is there in Indonesia. Angkor Wat temples are there. Everything is related. Not just that. We are also related through biodiversity. Very important point. Very, very important point. Students don't realize it. But it's a very important point. We are also related through biodiversity, flora, fauna. Okay, so we have covered Sundaland also. Again, we are just talking about, in these notes, we are just talking about why it is important to conserve these systems. We have already finished discussing all this. So the next one that we will look at is Ramsar Convention. Okay, we will continue Ramsar Convention in the next class because Ramsar is quite huge. Once we start, I want to cover Ramsar Convention, Ramsar sites in India, and why these sites are so biodiverse. For example, we will take examples like the lake Chilika in Odisha. Is it a freshwater lake or a saltwater lake? Hey, It's a saltwater lake. Okay. It's a saltwater lake. What is Chilika Lake famous for? But which bird? Flamingos. The pink flamingos. Chilika Lake is very famous for flamingo. So in India, if you want to go to flamingo, you can go to two places. Where? One is Chilika Lake in Odisha. Where else can you go and see these pink birds? Run of Kutch. If you go to Run of Kutch also, you can see flamingos. Okay, so you need to know all these things. Tomorrow when you become IAS officers and you have lots of money, these are fantastic tourist spots. You can go to all these places, relax and enjoy. Okay, that's why you have to study this, very important. Ramsar sites, that's why they are making you study, really, making you study Ramsar sites, they're making you study bioreserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, so that we know everything about it, we can go relax. That is also very important. Okay, so but on a more serious notes, we will be studying about Ramsar Convention, Ramsar sites. All of these, there are over 42 Ramsar sites in India. All of them are highly biodiverse. So I think all of this needs at least 1.5 hours of continuous discussion. So we'll continue.